Hello everyone, and welcome to your professional diploma in digital marketing. Over the next 32 lessons, you will become equipped with top skills needed to succeed as a digital marketer. We'll explore the fundamentals, dive into different marketing methods, create paid advertising campaigns, and analyze performance. Today's exciting lesson is your introduction into this dynamic and rewarding field. Now, let's have a look at what we'll be covering throughout this lesson moving forward. First of all, we'll explore various digital marketing platforms to give you an overview of what is available for you to use. We'll also have a look at some common terms and acronyms, and then towards the end of this lesson, we'll have a look at the basics of performance marketing. And if you don't know what that is yet, well, you will find out towards the end of this lesson, so stay tuned. What is digital marketing exactly? Well, it's the most basic form of the promotion of products and services using electronic means. Essentially, for every traditional marketing channel, there are multiple digital equivalents. There are hundreds and hundreds of different channels, including some very niche ones, which means that it really only suits a small percentage of industries or people, and we can't possibly cover them all. But we'll be looking at the top digital marketing platforms for the purpose of this program. And by platforms, we basically mean all the different spaces where digital marketing is basically taking place. So, if we start off with social media, which falls under digital marketing, social media comprises of websites and applications that enable people to create and share content and/or to communicate with others. We're going to move on right now, but as I slowly transition into the next slide, I want you to quickly think of as many as you can. Ready? 3, 2, 1. So, as we said, we first have Facebook, which is then followed by YouTube, WhatsApp Messenger, Instagram, WeChat, TikTok, and Weibo. Snapchat, Pinterest, and Twitter, as well as LinkedIn, still remain popular, but have smaller amounts of users than what the other ones at the top do. So this is what I mean when I talk about platforms. All these different digital spaces or places, and in this case, it's social media. Then we have something called pay-per-click, which is also known as PPC, and that's a model of internet marketing, where advertisers pay a fee each time someone clicks on an ad. While this is not exactly a platform, it is a concept you need to be aware of and which is available on a lot of different platforms. So let's take a look at the places where we can actually create PPC ads. The one I'm sure we all know is Google Ads, and there are multiple campaign types within the platform, but the top ones are generally search, so that's essentially advertising for search engine results pages, then display, putting banners on different websites, and then shopping, which is for e-commerce or retail, and that is essentially a different kind of ad that appears on the search results page. And if you also look at the screenshot that I've added here, everywhere it says the beginning, it's an advertisement, right? At the beginning of your search, you can see towards the top or left of each search result, a small word that says ad. That is where we find the pay-per-click opportunities that companies put onto these search results pages. Everywhere it says at the beginning, it's an advertisement. You can't miss it. So this is what our pay-per-click ads would essentially look like. We pay to have the results shown at the top of the search results. PPC is my favorite aspect of digital marketing, and we'll be spending plenty of time on this as the skill is in high demand. On the right over here is the knowledge panel, but we'll be spending a bit more time on this as we progress through the lesson. Then we have Microsoft Advertising, which until recently was called Bing Advertising. And if you choose to advertise through this platform, then you would be advertising on the Bing search engine, as well as Yahoo and AOL. Google actually does not have any rights to advertise on these platforms, so it's a bit of an interesting one. It's a very good one to consider when you're looking at search advertising. Then there are many third-party platforms which assist us with performance or targeting with their product. These are known as software as service. All right, software as a service, that's what it is. AdRoll is a good example of a company that bridges the gap between what some platforms don't allow for various reasons. For example, as a finance company, you can't retarget or remarket to site visitors on search engines, but a company like AdRoll could do that for you. If you don't exactly get what that last bit means, that's okay. Let me explain myself properly for you. So in the digital sphere, we have the option of tracking the visitors that visit our website. If we want to create an ad specifically for the people that have visited us before, that is what is meant by remarketing. And Google, for example, has restricted this option for financial institutions. And using a third party like AdRoll will then help you working around those restrictions in a very legal and very honest way. We will be spending a lot more time in remarketing throughout the course, as it's very powerful and very important for you to understand from the start. Another example of a platform for PPC ads would be Next. Here you can build your own interactive ads, manage different campaigns from one dashboard, and then also publish them to different platforms from there. Next is great for when you want to have one single option of creating a nice design. But we will go into ad creation into a bit more detail as well at a later point in the course. It's just really nice to be aware of it. Now, we've had a look at PPC. The next thing I'd like to take you through is something called organic marketing. And organic marketing basically means that you would get your own customers to come to you naturally over time, rather than artificially via pad links or paid ads. Let's have a look at what kind of things would fall under this category of organic marketing. So first up, we have something called search engine optimization, or SEO for short. And that is increasing the amount of visitors to a website by obtaining a high ranking placement in the search engine results page. So essentially appearing underneath the top ads on a search engine results page, but not paid ones. And it's very important to actually note that. Then we have something called Google My Business. And let me just show you what it looks like from here. It is called Knowledge Panel, and it's powered by something called the Knowledge Graph. It's a project by Google, and essentially, it's just instead of having to tie together different search terms, it's trying to draw out the context of those search terms and then provide better search results for the person who's actually doing the searching. So we can see here that we have an Adidas as an example. This is what the Google My Business listing actually looks like. This knowledge panel doesn't only just appear for brand searches though, it also appears for different search terms. The knowledge panel was introduced in 2012, and it's Google's way of connecting information. So you can see on the right there's far more information about the business than there used to be, or what we thought was even possible. There's reviews included, very popular times we're in, and you can also add a review. You can ask questions, and now you can even submit a lead. So there's various changes that are always happening to this listing. Definitely worth doing. Even if you're not a brick and mortar store, as in you don't have a physical location, still definitely worth doing. People still look up brands that don't have a physical location. Just remember that. As I mentioned, it's also called the knowledge panel. So if we just look at Zara here, for example, which has not just got one location, it's got multiple locations, and they haven't even sorted that out. That's another story. But at the bottom, you should be able to see it says, claim this knowledge panel. So at the moment, actually, Zara have not claimed their knowledge panel. And this is all just information provided by Google's knowledge graph. Then we have something called direct traffic. And we'll be spending a bit more time on that at a later lesson. But this is essentially people who visit your website, not through advertising, but through putting your direct address into their browser bar. This is a source of organic marketing. It would usually be as a result of other people marketing your business by speaking about it or them hearing about it via the grapevine, because people wouldn't just know what your brand name was, what your URL was, right? It could be also based on bookmarking, but it's in here because it's a big source of traffic that we must take note of. And then we have customer reviews. Now, I think everyone is always amazed at what they can actually get if they ask, and I know I am. So it's definitely worth trying to ask your customers to leave reviews on Facebook and on Google. It's also a well-known documented fact that if you have more positive reviews, then potential new customers are more likely to convert to an actual sale. So it's very important to have a part of your strategy, and I'd like you to note that. There is more on organic marketing in lesson 5, and please take note of that too, so that you can really link that in your notes correctly. We're looking at a range of things in that lesson, so definitely look forward to it, because that range of facts that we're going to be going over and content is definitely going to help elevate your business, especially if you're starting off a business from scratch. A big part of digital marketing is communications. First up here, we have email. Email has very much involved itself in a short lifespan, or evolved itself in a very short lifespan. Personal email addresses were introduced in 1991, and now we have automation systems that enable hugely advanced targeting and segmentation to send very targeted messages to people. Email marketing basically involves staying in touch with your audience through, email in various stages. You might want to create a newsletter, for example, send thank you messages after purchase, or maybe even send reminders. All of this falls within the email marketing umbrella. We aren't spending much time on email specifically because it pretty much explains itself, but you are going to understand content development and segmentation, which will certainly apply here. Then there are affiliates, and affiliates are essentially partnerships. And they can range themselves from being between small businesses to huge multi-billion-dollar partnerships. Now, apart from the channels that we've already mentioned here, there are loads of other ones, such as podcasts and also instant messaging. But due to the nature of this course, we won't be able to go into all of them, or else we'll certainly be here for a lot longer than just 32 lessons. The aim of today's lesson is just to give you a broad overview of what's out there. And then we'll get into a lot more detail throughout the duration of this program. The next thing I'd like to take you through is some common terms and acronyms that are used in digital marketing, because we'll be using these different terms as we progress through this course, but not only throughout this course, but throughout the world of real marketing too. So the next part is quite important, as things can get pretty complicated if you don't know your terms. Let's start off with impression. Now, you receive an impression when an ad or digital media is shown on a person's screen. So it's literally just appearing on the screen. It doesn't have to be 100% on the screen either. It's just somewhere on the screen. So that doesn't mean someone has to actually have seen your post or ad. It just appeared on their screen whilst they were going about their day-to-day business. It's very important to know the difference, because that doesn't show actual interaction. The reach, however, refers to the number of people who have seen your ad or content. So now we're moving into more of a focus from the ad just being put on the person's screen, rather to who has actually seen the ad. Reach and impressions are often confused, and I need you to understand the difference right away. You can reach 100 people yet have 200 different impressions. What that means is that one, or on average at least every person of those 100 people, saw your ad twice. So you've received 200 impressions, but you've only reached 100 people. Then there is frequency, which is referring to the number of times someone may have seen the same ad. So if we take it back to the previous example with a reach of 100 users and 200 impressions, the frequency there was 2, because each user saw the ad 2 times. While we do not want people to see our ads multiple times and create frustration, we just want to keep an eye on not letting the frequency get too high. Otherwise, they will get tired of it and just, as I said, get quite frustrated with our efforts, which is never a good thing for the brand. You probably know it yourself. When you see something mentioned 1,000,000 times, you just get blind to it eventually. And that's essentially what I mean by that concept. The next term is simply a device. And that is what you are using when performing an action, for example, a mobile or a desktop or tablet. While I'm sure you all know what devices are, it's important for us to remember that this is what device means in digital marketing. Then a conversation, right? I need you to take this down because this is vitally important. A conversation occurs when a person completes a desired goal. For example, a purchase of or submitting a form. We'll be talking about conversations a lot and bring this up time and time again, but the sooner you understand this phrase, the better. So simplified, anytime you want to use it to do something and they actually do it, that is counted as a conversation. And this could be anything, like if they fill out a lead form, if they submit an order, if they subscribe to your newsletter, for example. All of these aspects are considered as conversations, as they are linked to your own goals. Remarketing is showing ads to people who have previously visited or interacted with your website or social media. The finding is that they are more interested in what you have to offer because they already visited you. Okay, they already have attention in what it is that you're actually putting out there through your website or your social media in many cases. And then we have metrics, another very big one. This is a measurable value used to show the effectiveness of marketing efforts. If your objective was to get traffic to your website, how would you know this is actually achieved? Well, by measuring the links clicked on, for example, this would be considered to be a metric, and we can actually use that information provided on in order to gain certain metrics that we need to measure performance with. If you want to measure how aware people are of your brand, you might want to check your impressions and your reach as well, never one or the other alone. Remember, two very different things. Impressions refers to appearances on the screen, whilst reach refers to the actual people who have viewed your ads. Those would be examples of metrics you would use to either track whether your marketing is successful or not, and definitely something that we'll unpack as we progress. The next term we would need to understand is segmentation, and this is basically grouping audiences together based on different criteria with the aim to target them with more relevant info or ads. So a very quick example would be when you want to target women with a more feminine ad and men with a more masculine ad. Let's just say that's an example of segmentation. Then lifetime value is the projected revenue that a customer will generate during their lifetime. Next up, I'd like to show you some different media buying options, and that essentially means how or when you want to pay. First up, there is CPC, and that is cost per click. So you basically pay every time someone clicks on your ad, and this is not to be confused with PPC, which is pay per click, which is just a type of ad. Okay, there's a big difference between the two. So pay per click is a campaign where you pay for clicks, and CPC is cost per click. Please write that down. And this is how much you would actually pay for each click. Then we have CPM, which stands for cost per mile, and that cost per 1,000 impressions, that is. Mile is Latin and stands for 1,000. And then we have the CPV, which is a cost per view. And this metric specifically applies to videos and video ads. Then we have CPA, which is the cost per acquisition. So for example, an acquisition could be a sign up. And then we have CPL, which is the cost per lead. So a fee would be charged every time a user fills in their details in a lead form. And then we have the CPE, which stands for cost per engagement. When we talk about the engagements in the digital marketing sphere, it's basically like an interaction. Now think about that, for example. An interaction needs to be well understood. It's actually a conversation being had with the client, and this conversation can be in the form of many different types. If you publish a YouTube video, for example, and someone comments on it or shares it, for example, that would be a type of engagement. These are pretty much some of the metrics that we'd be looking at when working on a campaign. For example, if you have a campaign where the objective is leads, then one of the metrics you need to measure to determine the success of your campaign would be CPL, cost per lead, because obviously you would need to make sure that apart from the acronyms for media buying options, there are a few more different avenues that we can actually take. You might think it's only a bit of Google ads or social media, but you'll find there's a whole lot more in the digital marketing sphere. And I promise, it's not just a bunch of acronyms. So first up, in the digital marketing, we have SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization, something we already mentioned. And this means optimizing your website so that you can appear closer to the top of the page. So when users search something, you want your content to appear. That's essentially the whole purpose of what SEO achieves. It's a type of organic marketing. Then we have SEM, which stands for Search Engine Marketing. This essentially refers to pay-per-click campaigns. And we had a look at this a little bit earlier in the lesson. So like Google Ads and Microsoft Advertising, for example. any type of ads you would put up on a search engine would be considered as this concept. And then last but not least, we have SMM, which stands for social media marketing. Let's go into the last topic of your intro to digital marketing, which is performance marketing. So what is performance marketing? Well, essentially, it's an umbrella term that refers to advertising on different channels and paying only when an action is completed. For example, a click or lead or a sale, that would be considered as an action being taken. So you don't pay for impressions, you only pay for the results, the performance of the ad essentially. Remember, when we mentioned affiliates earlier on, performance marketing is very important here. And you would pay affiliates for a specific action being taken, usually a sale. So let's break this down a little bit further. If we set the goal of getting lots of clicks, here we would pay, as mentioned, for those specific clicks, not for the overall impressions made. A place where you could find this, for example, is with Facebook advertising, where you would create an ad and then pay for every time someone, for example, clicks a link to visit your website. Then we have leads. In this case, you would set a CPL cost per lead target and pay for the leads that come in after that. Essentially, you would tell the advertisement platform how much you are willing to pay for a lead. That is a target CPL, which is not always 100% exact as an exact target, but on average, it will match. This is something you will find on Google Ads, for example, where you have smart bidding strategies to target a set CPL. And then we have the goal of sales. Here you would set a target return on investment or return on ad spend. Okay, very important to understand that. Simply put, the return on investment shows you how much you gain after your investments. For example, if you spend $100 on marketing campaigns and then you get sales of $1,000 after that, your return on investment is 900% and gained 9 times the amount that you initially invested. The ROAS is very similar, but it includes the investment. So in this case, if you invested $100 and gain $1,000 in revenue, you would have an ROAS of 10. For every dollar you've invested, you get $10 back. And just keep in mind that this does not necessarily mean that that is your profit. But these are in some cases just metrics that we would use when it comes to measuring the performance of our sales-related goals. True performance marketing encompasses a variety of strategies and analytics. It's not just about sitting at an automated target and then leaving it running. There are some core traits of performance marketing, namely analysis, of course, and whatever means of information you have available. Then optimization, incredibly important because you're optimizing for better performance based on your analysis. Communication. Oh gosh, communication has to be one of the most effective things that we consider in our strategy. And it's effective across all channels and it needs to be, otherwise there is no point in our efforts. So you need to make sure that as a business, if you have control over your communication, that is fantastic and that will definitely set the precedent for your overall company's performance. And then efficiency, and that's obviously referring to quite a few things. In understanding these points a little bit better, we start with analysis. Let's understand analysis in a bit more detail. Well, in order to understand analysis, we need to understand that when we deciphering the information, we use analytical tools, things like Google Analytics, for example, reports that we can get from in-platform as well as third parties. Now, things that you would want to analyze would be your target audience, your marketing platforms, as well as your website. So who you are targeting to, where you are targeting them from, and what you are sending to them. That is information that constantly needs to be analyzed. Then we have the optimization techniques, which are definitely varied, but must always or should always be focused on data and insights. Okay. And insights only come about from looking at the data and analyzing it properly, as well as actually applying some sort of logic and knowledgeable understanding of trends and also different things that contribute to the trends that are unfolding, such as the market sentiment, which is how people feel about certain topics of discussion or different industry trends, for example. We'll actually be looking at insights versus observations in the last lesson of Module 3. So you can definitely look forward to that as it approaches us. And then if we move on to communication, which is so effective across all different mediums, you'll understand that it is vitally important for retention. So keeping your customers happy, which is where communication really comes into play. Whether they are prospective clients or existing clients, communication is absolutely essential to perfect. For social engagement, you need to have proper social media in place, which also aligns itself well with community management policies, etc. So keep that in mind as we get deeper into the understanding of social media engagement. Those have to be there. And then, of course, if you're using email, the communication around that needs to be streamlined, sending relevant communication, using the best practices, etc. Finally, efficiency, okay, which is all about logic and adaptation. It is finding solutions to problems, essentially. And that's where what it really comes down to, not just letting it run or letting it go. And also thinking outside the box. It's not just about the marketing channel. That might not always be the problem. It could be the product, it could be the site, etc. And that's what we need to remember as we progress. Then no wasted spend. All right, it's incredibly important. I don't know how many times I've seen a keyword in a Google search campaign where there's been so much money spent and it's completely irrelevant to the business. We need to be strategic, logic, and smart about the word choice that we actually use. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. It's the reality of marketing, but we need to learn from other people's mistakes here and just perfect what we need to focus on in order to be as efficient as possible with our spend. Because yes, these spends could add up to be quite a bit, but if we're really productive, effective, and efficient with our word choices, then we'll definitely be gearing our efforts in the right direction. Then the main considerations in performance marketing, which are essentially what ensures that we can keep those 4 core concepts, is firstly tracking. Understand also that your budget, of course, is about making sure that we spend efficiently and we spend effectively as well. We want to be smart, but we also want to be effective, right? It's very important that we balance the understanding of those two together. Then channel selection, all right? It's very important to understand that this too. That's also about understanding the target market for the target audience, as well as the different channels that are available to you and knowing which demographics are on which channels. Whether the reach maybe outweighs other things like Facebook, for example, that's what it's about. Cleverly choosing your channels to achieve different goals that you have outlined. Then there are also landing pages. And landing pages are the ones that you send to users after clicking on an ad. So literally, the page that a user lands on after clicking on a link from a post or ad. Those need to be optimized, user-friendly, and as fast as possible. It's very important. Once someone has clicked on an ad, essentially the responsibility of the platform is over. Then it's over to your website and your customer service or any kind of internal process that you have in place. Then the competition. And I'm just going to leave that here for now, as we'll go into this in a bit more detail at a later point. But it's just a tip for now. Be aware of the competitors, who they are and what they're up to. In marketing, it's all about the competition. And then volume, right? When it comes to optimizing a campaign, you need to make sure that you have enough volume to optimize with. If, for example, you have targeted 100 people, then there's no point in optimizing because it's not a big enough pool of people to optimize for. So at least 1,000, I would say, in terms of ads, at least 1,000 impressions. Then there are various different types of thresholds that you would look at. It's very important that we understand the perspective of our efforts. And that is officially it for lesson 1. I'm so excited to see you again next time in lesson 2. Now that you have a basic understanding of the terms, we are really ready to start with the fun stuff. So see you next time for lesson 2 of a professional diploma in digital marketing.